What are some cryptid, ghost, unexplained stories you'd be willing to share?
I once woke up suddenly with sleep paralysis. It felt like someone jumped on me and I had an immense weight on my chest. I was also being choked. To top it off, I felt like I was being molested. Like someone was slapping my genitals around. I just remembered suffocating and intense shame. Almost as soon as it started, about 10 to 20 seconds, I could feel the pressure relieve and I rolled over. My throat felt less compressed and I could breathe. I was awake the entire time and could see with my eyes but could not move until I was released. It never happened again, but it was very real.
I used a Ouija board once, and it read out, "Tell Bunny I say hi." It freaked me out a bit, but ultimately didn't relate to me, so I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I was at my parents', and I nonchalantly mentioned it, and my mom went white and said, "My dead uncle called me Bunny."
I grew up in an old house and my family definitely experienced events that were hard to explain. Besides all the usual noises and occasionally hearing your name being spoken, here's the top 2 weirdest things. My brother and I were teens, eating dinner in the kitchen. There was a glass of water on the counter. We heard a noise where the glass was, and both looked toward it and we swore we saw it move an inch. As we were still looking and discussing it, the glass flew several feet across the counter and smashed onto the floor. Once when I was in college and I was home for holidays, I was in the kitchen getting food prepared. I was home alone at that point and my brother was due home at any moment. I heard the front door open and close. I called out hello to my brother and heard nothing back. Then I saw a shadow pass by the kitchen into the hallway, and I assumed my brother was being rude so I followed and kept calling hello. I saw the shadow again turning another corner toward my brother's bedroom. I saw my brother's door closing. At this point I was calling out about what a jerk he was, because we hadn't seen each other in months. I pushed the bedroom door open and uttered some insults, and the room, as well as the whole house was empty. That was super chilling. I really had seen someone moving through the house. Flash forward 15 years later and when my husband and I bought an oldish house, built in 1870, I was up in the 3rd floor arranging boxes and I heard a very clear and very polite woman's voice say, "Well, hello there. Never saw or heard anything in this house since."
The first 2 are absolutely terrifying, but the third is just adorable.
Your second story about the shadow person is similar to what happened to my sister. She got home from school before me, and was making a snack in the kitchen, when she heard the front door open and someone come up the stairs towards the kitchen. Assuming it was me, she kept her back turned and started talking as if it was me. When she eventually turned to look at me, she saw a shadowy figure near the door of the kitchen, and when she looked at it, it ran out of the room. I'll ask her what she remembers about it.
I shared this on Reddit a couple of times, I'll make it short this time. 6 or so years ago weird shit started happening in my mother's apartment. I lived there alone, she was living with her BF but kept the apartment anyway. The door to my bedroom would open or close on its own. At some point in the night, it would close, or open at random intervals. With the door handle moving and all that. And not like slowly, sometimes it would full on slam shut or open. I tried everything, closing all the windows to see if maybe it was the wind, nope. Seeing if there was anyone else in the room, never found anybody, plus the room on the other side was empty except for a wardrobe. Hell, it even happened more than a few times in front of a friend. The friend in question also told me my lamp started to switch on and off when I was sleeping. Not like in the movies where the lamp malfunctions, she said it was like it was turning on, then off, then on, etc. Toward the end of this, the sofa that was right beside the door moved by itself while I was on it, in the middle of the night, while I was on Skype on camera. The door kept opening and closing a few times a night for a few days, then it stopped. Also, I kept having sleep paralysis with visual and auditory hallucination at the time. I honestly could have thought I was simply going crazy, but I had eyewitnesses. Never understood what happened this week. Never happened again. It was a rainy winter morning. My father and I were pulling out of the driveway headed to school. We both saw a glimpse of a girl in a white dress, barefoot, blonde, maybe 5 years old, run around the corner of our home and out of sight. We both looked at each other and acknowledged that we witnessed the same thing. He got out of the car and ran around the house to look for her. When he came back, he said he couldn't find anyone but called my mom to let her know that a little kid might be running around the yard. We thought it was weird, but not much was said of it. And there weren't any missing kids in the area. A few months later, we were remodeling our basement and found a photo album hidden behind the drywall. It was full of photos of a little girl with blonde hair in a white dress. The photo album was from 1922. The family that originally lived in the house died of TB. When I was 7 years old, my grandma was in the hospital dying. At the time, my family was strapped for cash and my mom was pregnant, so only my dad went to California, where she lived, to see her before she died. The day that she died, we got a phone call from her with her wanting to talk to each of us, saying how much she loved us. A few hours later, we got a call from family members saying that she had passed away. When we told them that we had just received a call from her a few hours prior, everybody was in disbelief, saying that she had been laying unconscious in the hospital bed all day, and she could have never called, let alone been able to articulate her thoughts to us. To this day we have no idea how she called us, and I don't think we ever will.
Astronaut Deke Slayton's red race plane was seen flying at John Wayne Airport during curfew, where aircraft were not allowed to take off before 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., depending on the day. Thanks a lot people who make noise complaints. Grr. The airport's officials sent a letter about the noise to Dick's home, and it was received by his very confused widow. Apparently, Dick had died many hours ago, and his race plane had been in a museum for years. One afternoon, I was at work. I walked past a room with a window in the door and automatically glanced in the window. There was a woman standing in the room. Except there are only 3 people in the building, and the other 2 were in the office behind me. I took a couple steps, realized what I had just seen, and backed up quickly, but by the time I got back to the window the room was empty. There was only one door, and when I opened it the room was empty. At the same building, a co-worker was telling me that she was in the office right around the corner from that same room. She couldn't see the door, but she could see the shadow of the door on the floor as it slowly opened and closed. She was the only one in the building at the time, and she refused to check. I arrived about an hour later and she asked me to check the door and it was still locked. I worked there about 3 years, and every single one of us had stories. We heard voices in empty rooms. Once we were sitting in the office and we heard somebody breathing in an empty corner. It was common to be in one of the rooms and think somebody had just walked into the room, only to look up and find that the room was empty except for you. I had one manager who scoffed at all of our stories. She did not believe us when we told her there was something fairly benign but creepy in the building. We were sitting in the office. She scoffed and loudly said, "If there's anything in here, prove it." We all held our breath, kind of nervous, a bit scared but also curious. And just about the time my manager was getting that look on her face that said, "Ha, told you so," something was thrown out in the hallway. It took several minutes to work up the courage before going to check and finding that a book that normally sat on a bookshelf near the front door had somehow gone from that bookshelf around the corner and halfway down the hallway. The manager never talked about it and quit shortly after that. I've since quit also, but last I heard they were still hearing voices and seeing shadows in the building.
That must really suck for that ghost. Imagine spending eternity at work.
I don't really believe in the paranormal. In fact, I don't really believe it at all, but I do have a few stories that stick with me that are unexplainable to my brain even years later with a more adult and reasonable thought process. The first that comes to mind is one I always tell my friends that gives me chills and freaks me out and will always make me feel same type of way for the foreseeable future. I was probably 9 or 10 at the time and my dad was in the military. We were stationed in Fort Knox and lived on base in a provided military apartment. I moved around a lot growing up, and have plenty of superstitious family members. So at the time of being a child the fear of the supernatural always existed. I lived pretty normally and then I made a friend named Dylan, hope he is doing well these days. One day, after school, his mom invited me over to their home, they also lived on base. Right away, entering that apartment, I felt very uneasy or like someone was watching me. However, as the day went by I played with him and his little sister and things were normal. Nothing amiss, and so on his birthday, I returned to his home for the final time. When I came through the door again I got that uneasy feeling. This time I asked him about it, and his demeanor changed as well as his little sister's. He didn't really want to talk about it. Being young I found that to be a bit strange. As his birthday went on I found myself needing to use the bathroom. There were 2 bathrooms, one upstairs and one downstairs. I went to enter the bathroom downstairs and without a missed breath, him and his sister both say, "We don't use that bathroom. Don't go in there." I didn't really think much of it until he asked if I would stand outside the door of the upstairs bathroom while he used it. Things now seemed off and that uneasy feeling sank in. I complied. We went upstairs. He went to pee and left the door wide open and asked me not to let anyone shut it. Which freaked me out because it was just me and him upstairs. I was dying to piss and asked if he would stand outside because now I was nervous. To which he refused. Angry that he didn't return the favor I stormed off downstairs, yanked the bathroom door open and meant to take a piss. Kind of funny, and it gets a little funnier and terrifying. 10 years old, pants halfway down, I am about ready to piss when the lights go off. The switch is inside as well as the lock. Which frightens me because now I can't see and I have my pants down. Then it flicks back on and then off again, and then it begins happening a lot more rapidly. What gives me chills is that to this day, I distinctly remember seeing the light switch flip itself up and down on its own. This picks up. Now a terrified 9 or 10-year-old, I begin to panic and try to open the door. I got the door open at about a head's width and it slammed on me really hard. Lights are still flickering. I open it again and go to step out, and it slams on me even harder. Now crying for his mom or anyone, because the lights are flickering and the door is slamming on me. His mom hears my plea and is yanking on the door, to which I am pushing. Finally, the door flung open and both her and I went falling forward at force. I cried and went home. It really ruined me being friends with Dylan, and we never talked about it. I remember later my mom asked if I remembered that story, and told me his mother called and apologized. She also proceeded to tell my mom further that her and her husband had been experiencing a lot of things in the apartment. One being that she would wake up in the night to something raising the covers off of her husband and whispering his name. I don't believe in ghosts, but that is one of the most terrifying and unexplainable portions of my childhood. An experience unlike any other.
My question is, after experiencing that, why don't you believe in ghosts or spirits, I should say?
Why oh why do I always read these threads at 4 a.m. when I can't sleep?
I was house-sitting my friend's house for a week, and the first night, I hooked up my PlayStation and was getting ready to play, when a super loud, distressed voice from right in front of me said, "I'm so glad I found you." I just froze and didn't know what to do, so I started the game, and pretended it didn't happen. Throughout the week, doors would shut, there was a super cold spot outside the door of the bedroom where I slept, and on the last night, I left the house to get food, and all the locks to all the doors were locked when I came home. The front and back doors have a deadbolt, and a slide lock, and both were locked from the inside. No one got into the garage and all the windows were locked too.
About a decade ago, I was visiting a graveyard to pay my respects. This was back in my family's home country. I was feeling absolutely fine throughout the day, but come time to leave the graveyard, I suddenly felt like I couldn't walk by myself. My shoulders were extremely heavy, my body was drained, and my legs felt like they were being anchored down by weights, more specifically, hands. It was as if I had multiple hands grabbing me by the ankles, so I couldn't keep walking. I actually felt quite panicked, so I told the family member I was with that I'm literally feeling like my life forces, for lack of better translation, are being sucked out of me, to which they nonchalantly replied, well, they probably want your young, lively spirit. In the end, I had to be carried out of the premises.
When I was a baby, I had a bunch of stuffed animals in a net on a wall corner in my room, visible from my crib. One night, after I had been put to bed, my mom and grandma heard me giggling on the baby monitor while they had been sitting together in the kitchen. They went up to check, as that was odd, I should have been asleep by then. They entered my room, found all of my stuffed animals neatly lined up in front of my crib, with the net still intact. My mom, grandma, and I were the only ones home. Replying to myself, as I remembered another story. My mom was driving on a country-ish back road that had houses on it. As she was driving, she saw a house engulfed in flames. She called 911 to report it, though she later found out, I don't remember how, that there was nothing wrong with the house. Less than a week later, the house actually did catch on fire. And no, my mom didn't do it.
Well friends, that's all for now. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we would love to hear your stories in the comments below.